Thank you for joining us. You're listening to the Beyond 50 radio program. I'm your host, Daniel Davis. Today we have a very compelling show for those of you out there who want to find more meaning in life, especially if you find that through other people. A little bit of inspiration, a jolt, if you will. Maybe even a great leap about how you view the way you've lived your life in light of the way how people have found an impact on their lives with a thing such as cancer. Cancer is one of those diseases that once you hear the word sends shivers and ripple effects through your spine, kind of disorienting you. It's bad enough if you have it for yourself, but then also it's just as devastating if it's a friend or a loved one because you want to know what you can do to help them feel better. Joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program today is a marvelous guest who has many, many, many years of writing books about how we can humanize the medical community to give us more hope, faith, and healing and inspiration. His first book, Love, Medicine, and Miracles, was published in 1986, and after that, How to Live Between Office Visits. Today we're going to be talking about his new book, Faith, Hope, and Healing, which is a compilation of stories and reflections about how people began to actually live and see things such as cancer become what they would call a miracle in and of itself to wake them up to a life that perhaps they felt they were on autopilot. I'd like to welcome to our program today our guest, Dr. Bernie Siegel. And Bernie, thank you for joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program today.
Oh, my pleasure.
You bet. Now, for me, you kind of go back to the 90s, the first time that I had heard, and you were on a compilation with what was known as a Quest Love Trilogy series, and where great thinking minds came together, kind of reflecting on life and the marvelousness of what love is all about. And then here I get the opportunity for the first time to talk with you, and I feel that it's a real pleasure for you to take the time to join us here on the program. And in this book, as I was reading through it, I thought to myself, back in the 90s, as I was reading about things like this, I started thinking about cancer as a mind-body-soul connection rather than something that people tend to say, well, it's genetic or it's, this or it's that. And I thought to myself, people can sometimes actually think their way into sickness. What has been your experience about that?
Yeah, what pops into my head as you're talking, as I was working with people, what started it was this simple end of a request from a patient of mine. Said, I need to know how to live between office visits.
I like that title.
What I discovered was that if you help people live, they didn't die when they were supposed to. Mm-hmm. So, as a doctor, it was like, hey, wow, look, But what I got was lots of criticism, and on all the famous talk shows with everybody saying, oh, you're blaming your patients if you ask them what's going on in their life. And I remember this poem, because a therapist friend said to me, if writers, authors, poets see something, then pursue it, because they're looking at life. And this line comes from W.H. Auden, a poem called Miss G. A woman is examined by the doctor. He finds she has cancer, goes home, sits down to dinner with his wife, and says, cancer's a funny thing. Childless women get it, and men, when they retire, it's as if there had to be an outlet for their foiled creative fire. Now, I said that one day, and an oncologist said, hey, just because it rhymes doesn't make it true. But what we know today, because studies have now been done that weren't done 20 and 30 years ago, loneliness affects the genes which control immune function. Oh. So if you are lonely, you are more likely to develop cancer, autoimmune diseases, or even the flu for that matter. And again, this is why I began to see how much your life related to it. And the next problem then was, oh, you're telling me it's my fault, I'm guilty, I made myself sick. No, I'm saying you have to be a responsible participant, though. Take a look at your life. Look at your experience. If a loved one just died, if you moved across the country, lost your job, whatever, those are things that can make you vulnerable. So let's look at yourself, your life, how you're facing the future, what are your fears, and you really begin to treat the person's experience. And that experience becomes our inner chemistry. You can't separate your life, and I mean starting from day one and what your parents start telling you. It just goes on and on. Literally, if I had to summarize what the world needs, it's every child needs to grow up with love. Then, boy, would we save a lot of money on illnesses and self-destructive behavior and violence and everything else.
It's also interesting, too, Bernie, that when you take a look at something like cancer or a terminal illness, and you point this out in your book, Faith, Hope, and Healing, is it makes a real difference on how the medical provider works with someone in this condition, because you tend to, I keep remembering a movie called My Life starring Michael Keaton, and there's a scene where he's talking with a doctor. He's 33 years old, and he has terminal cancer, so it's believed, but he's also going to become a father. And the doctor simply says, it's not looking too good for you. You have a spring to look forward to. We've got medications to manage the pain. And literally at that moment, he felt like he was just having any last bit of hope in his life for anything, just basically taken away from him, which perpetuates his anger even more. And what I enjoyed about your book, Faith, Hope, and Healing, is how people, as you were saying earlier, begin to take responsibility and say, okay, wait a minute, let's move a different direction and see what a gift this is, and also finding doctors and getting them to actually begin to speak the language to kind of move that direction as well.
Well, the subtitle of the book is Inspiring Lessons Learned from People Living with Cancer. So, yes, when you say to some people, what is the experience of cancer, they'll say gift, wake-up call, blessing, because of what it's led them to do. And I say to everybody, don't wait till you have a life-threatening illness to start living. I mean, accept your mortality and use your time appropriately. And also that then you don't give your power away. In other words, other people don't make me upset. I decide if I'm going to be upset. I'm the one who creates my thoughts. So I don't let other people drive me nuts. If I'm here for a limited time, it's not up to them, to make me happy or unhappy. It's up to me. And for people to take on that power for themselves. The other is that, hope. Hope is not a statistic. If there's one, think about the lottery, okay? Do people win it? Yes. What are the chances? 1 in 180 million or something? I know, I love to buy lottery tickets because to me it's fun, exciting to open the paper and say, did I win?
Right.
But one of our grandchildren always says to me, you're wasting your money. You're not going to win. But, hey, then you open the newspaper and somebody has got $88 million who didn't have a penny before, and what a gift to him. So when people say to me, what can I do for you? Fine, buy me a lottery ticket. It's again, just that kind of thing. So if somebody says to you, you're going to be dead in 2 months, bet them $20,000 you will live 3 months. And the doctor will say, well, yes, you could live 3 months. I'm right. Then why tell me I'm going to be dead in 2 months if you're not willing to back it up, with money? And you begin to realize that what they're talking about are averages and statistics. So some people live 5 years. Some people get so depressed they go home and die in a week. And I'm trying to teach people what I call survival behavior, that there's a personality to people who develop illness, but there's also a personality to people who exceed expectations. See, the key word for me in my life now is potential. What's your potential? Hey, you want to give it a shot. Now, if you grow up with parents, teachers, and clergy who tell you you are a problem, a failure, a mess, we can't be proud of you, God is punishing you, then you're afraid to participate in your own health. Because then, if I don't get well, then I didn't do it right. I didn't love enough. No, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is give it a chance. See what happens. I mean, I always recommend the movie Harold and Maude. And in it, Ruth Gordon plays an almost 80-year-old. And this line always stays in my head. Reach out. Take a chance. Get hurt even. Play as well as you can. Go team go. Give me an L, give me an I, give me a V, give me an E. Live. Otherwise, you got nothing to talk about in the locker room. So it's, again, give it a shot. But it's hard for people who have grown up without love from authentic people, from the authorities in their life, to take that step. And I try to encourage them. I try to reparent people, to let them know they're divine children and to go out and let's see what we can accomplish. And so I've been doing this for over 30 years. Why? Because there are a lot of people alive today who would be dead if somebody didn't give them some support and help them bring out the inspiration that was within them.
Hmm. I remember as I reflect on one of the stories in your book about a gentleman who was sick and dying, and they felt that he didn't really have, I think it was about 4 months. There's so many stories you kind of try to remember which one there was, but they're all very, very interesting in how these people really woke up and said, you know, this is a gift. But one of the things he had always wanted to do was to live in the mountains, and so he just decided, if I don't have that much time, that's what I'm going to do. Go ahead and share that story.
Yeah, that's the fellow who moved to Colorado.
Right.
I'm pretty sure you're talking about him.
Exactly.
This was somebody I was close to. He was in our support groups. And when he said, I'm going to the mountains, you know, to spend the end of my life there, enjoying the beauty, I said to the family, when he dies, call me. I feel very close to him. I want to attend the funeral. Well, a year goes by, and I don't get a phone call. So I am really annoyed with this family who is sensitive to me, you know.
Right.
And I call the number I had, and he answered the phone. And I said, what happened? He said, it's so beautiful here, I forgot to die. Now, the thing that I laugh about, you see, is I tell that story in Colorado, and people's hands go up. Yes? Why did it help him to move here? I said, I think you need to be in Florida. See, that's the craziness of it. I mean, for one person, Colorado's where I want to be, in the mountains, and for somebody else, it's, gee, I wish I were on the seashore. So it's give people that permission, you know. Don't wait again till you're almost dead to say, okay, I'm moving. Live where you want to live. Live your life. Because, again, I know somebody in Florida, multimillionaire, who had a big business. When he learned he had a couple of months to live, that's what he was told. His wife said, honey, then we're buying a house on the ocean. You can sit on the porch and listen to Bernie's tapes and meditate. And he said, I'm taking my tie off and canceling the dress code at work. Because who cares whether you have a jacket and a tie on the last 2 months of your life? Mm-hmm. Well, this man lived for 5.5 years. And he was an inspiration to everybody and really remodeled his hospital because they respected him. See, the doctors were telling him, you got 2 months to live. When they saw him go on for 5.5 years, they knew it's him, you know what I mean? Not, isn't it wonderful, the treatment, look what happened. And so they changed the hospital and how they cared for people and their attitude towards people because he taught them a lesson. And I was down there many times speaking. And I always love it because he would never be dressed, you know, formally, introducing me. He'd always have no ties, sweater on, something of that sort. And it taught everybody in the audience, and me too, something that, you know, relax, enjoy the moment. And if you want to wear a tie, fine, but don't worry about people and impressing everybody. Just be yourself.
You know, I think it's amazing, Bernie, and I'm sure that in the 30 years you would agree with this, is how often most of us sweat so many small things. And really, it's all small stuff. It's amazing that we don't wake up to that because it's those kinds of tensions that can begin blocking the flow of energy, the flow of love, intention. You can name a whole multitude of things that can get the body to shut down and even get diseased.
And the what I have come to realize and share a lot with people is that we're all multiple personalities. If you grow up with love, you're a multiple who isn't worried about the world and what it thinks of you. You can go out and be silly, you know, be a kid, have some fun, relate to different people. And I grew up that way, and I notice I do that. I mean, I don't, you know, I just go out in the world and I really enjoy meeting people, total strangers, because I just have fun in terms of how I react and the things I say. Now, I mean, just so people understand how crazy sometimes how I act. I mean, somebody gave me a gift certificate. I'm checking out of a store. You know, I purchased something, so I give them the gift certificate. And the young woman behind the counter says, oh, it must be your birthday. I said, no. Now, I don't decide to say this. What came out of me was, no, I'm with the mafia, and I do favors for people, and they reward me. Well, you know, the young lady looks at me like, oh, my God, what do I do now?
Right.
I just said, honey, if you need a favor, ask for Carmine. And I leave the store, you know. And I have to laugh at myself saying, where did that come from? But I'm not worried about, did you hear what he said? What do you think of that man? But if you grow up without love, then you can't be that kind of person. You can't have fun because you're worried about relationships. They have been painful for you, and you'll get hurt again. And it's so sad. And again, I say to people, don't wait for a disaster to reparent yourself, because that's my word. Being born again, reparent, it doesn't matter. You're creating that. And let me add one other thing, because you said reflect, and after every story is a reflection. And that word means a lot to me, because I've learned from myths and fairy tales, and two in particular. One, the ugly duckling. You're rejected by your mother. You're out in the world on your own. But he does not spend his life cursing his mother and carrying that message that I'm ugly and don't fit in. Then there's a story that Joseph Campbell shares of a tiger whose mother gives birth to him and dies chasing some goats. And so the goats come over and decide they'll raise him. And he grows up thinking he's a goat. He doesn't know any different. And then one day another tiger chases the goats, and he's just sitting there because he doesn't know enough to run. And the tiger says to him, "What the hell are you doing here? You're a goat. You're a tiger, not a goat." And there's some humorous lines of him saying, "I'm a vegetarian," and so forth. But the tiger takes him over again to a still pond. And that's the same with the ugly duckling. Mm-hmm. Your mind is quiet. Your environment is quiet, not turbulence. And you look down, and you're a tiger. You're not a goat. You're a swan, not an ugly duckling. And as Campbell went on to say, it's like meditation. And that's what I try to get across to people. Quiet your mind, quiet your life, and see who you really are. Don't live in fear and worry and what's going to happen and what should I do and what will impress my parents and, the neighbors. And just ask yourself, who am I? Quiet yourself. And then the other with water is, don't be afraid to go into the depths. Go below the surface too. What is really within me? And I see that in dreams and drawings. Let the unconscious out. That's the real wisdom that's in all of us. I always say sleeping, to me, and I mean this literally, I don't think we sleep in order to get a rest, because you could lie down, okay? There are animals that sleep on their feet. Why? Because it's dangerous to sleep. Think of evolution, okay? Mm-hmm. You're sleeping in a cave, in walks a tiger, boom, you're done. So maybe it's better if you didn't sleep. Stay awake, keep alert. I think we sleep in order to connect with this inner wisdom. That's really why we become quiet at night. And our metabolism and a lot of things change. But that's when the unconscious can say, here, look at this. And it can't talk to us in words. Even the body speaks in dreams. This is something that doctors aren't taught, but you can make diagnoses, physical diagnoses from dreams and drawings. And again, people aren't aware of what they're displaying, but I know anatomy. I look at the picture. I know they're telling me about their body. And so, again, I'd say to people, pay attention to that and don't keep a lid on it. So when you do the meditation, when you do the imagery, you're saying to the unconscious, come on out, I'm ready. But if you're constantly, I got to think. Well, my response is, I was just thinking, I said to a male engineer, please draw me a picture. He handed me a page of instructions, all written out on how to draw the picture. And he never drew a picture. But that woke him up, He was asked to draw a picture, and he wrote a page of instructions. And he realized how much he was in his head, mm-hmm. thinking and not doing what he was asked to do.
I keep remembering as I was talking earlier about the Quest Love Trilogy series. I know that you were part of that with Marianne Williamson.
Yes, I remember back then.
And I keep attributing one particular quote to you, and correct me if I'm wrong, but this is what I remember, because when you think about sweating the small stuff and you're worried about what other people think about you, and all these compilations that can lead you to a breakdown in your health, for instance. And that is, just think about this, and this was the quote, billions of years of evolution, and nobody can screw up quite like you can. And when I heard that, I thought, What genius. A perfect universe creates the perfection because nobody can make mistakes quite the way that you can.
Yeah.
And that makes you kind of want to laugh to think that nobody can do it like I do.
I think we're our worst critics, but again, that's why I say, if you don't have love, it's, oh boy.
Yeah.
It's just incredible to me. Because when I first send out letters to people, 100 people, saying, you want to live a longer, better life, come to a meeting. These were cancer patients of mine. I thought 300 to 500 people would show up because I didn't tell them they couldn't bring friends and relatives who may be dealing with it too. And I was amazed at when, less than a dozen women came to the first meeting. I realized I don't know the people that I'm caring for. I want them to live. They're afraid of participating, of getting it wrong, or, I don't have time to read a book, answer your questions, whatever it was. They all had excuses. Even when, as I mentioned about my drawings, I've had people come in and say, and these are people with cancer, I'm trying to help, and I say, please draw a picture of yourself, your treatment, et cetera. And they'll come in and say, at the bottom of the page, it's written, I had my 10-year-old son, Bobby, do this because I'm not good at drawing. You're trying to deal with cancer and you're worried about getting a bad grade in art. I mean, that is not survival behavior,
Right.
And again, other studies show that laughter, cancer patients who laugh live longer. So, more and more you see how emotions are, again, they become your chemistry. And when you live in fear, that's the biggest thing I'm often talking to people about. When you live in fear, it's self-destructive. Fear is appropriate when a dog is going to bite you and you climb, run, jump, faster than you've ever done before. That's because of how your brain is working, your heart is working, your blood vessels and your muscles are working. But if you stay in fear, then you are going to hurt yourself because immune function is down. The parts of your brain that are working are not the ones that will help you deal with, right decisions and things of that sort. So people need to stop living in fear. They don't know the future. So live in the moment, one day at a time. I always say the kids and animals have no problems with this. They're trying to have a nice day. And adults are what's going to happen 6 months from now, 5 years from now. And that's part of what becomes self-destructive.
Mm-hmm. I know in your book, too, I'll relate one particular story. It was about a young girl, I believe it was, who had cancer, or not cancer, but leukemia. And you hear this kind of thing throughout not only the book, but actually in life, where the first sort of reaction is an anger toward God, especially when it comes to a little one. And I know because I've had personal experience with my own son with an extremely life-threatening disease, and you stand there feeling helpless, and you say to yourself, what did this child do that caused this? I mean, it's like a deer in headlights. And then you sometimes have to bargain, well, if I do this, and that's what begins to happen, is you begin bargaining, saying, well, God, if you let this person live, then this will happen. But why do you think that we have that sort of compulsion, if you will, to become angry with a creator when something like that happens?
Well, I think it's a lack of understanding. Mm-hmm. For me, it wasn't so much anger as it was to really say to God, why'd you make a world like this? Why should it, I did a lot of children's surgery. We have a grandchild with a genetic problem. Why did you do this? Why'd you make a world like this? And God's answer is, a perfect world is not creation. It's a magic trick. You're here to live and to learn. And see, and the other is that God doesn't cause this. I mean, yes, there are religions that make people feel guilty. I mean, let me reflect a moment. In 1824, Pope Leo XII declared if you vaccinate your children against smallpox, you're no longer a child of God because God decides who gets smallpox. Mm-hmm. Now, the Catholic Church changed that. Somebody wrote, Billy Graham, who's in the newspaper, does God want me to have cancer? He said, not necessarily. I thought, what are you talking about? Not necessarily. He didn't answer my letter. But one of his comments was, well, God might give some people cancer so they become more spiritual and get closer to God. But, then it's into what did I do wrong, guilt and blame, and that is
Yeah, like you're being punished for something.
Yeah, and so you grow up, as I say, with the guilt, blame, and shame. And it's not about that. I mean, one of the things that I found very helpful was a discussion. I'm trying to think of his name. It'll come to me. But I say God always answers prayers. Now, sometimes the answer you get isn't what you would like. And he compared it to this. If a woman goes into labor in her 6th month, all the doctors come in to help her and stop the labor. And there are times when you're not capable of helping or giving birth to yourself that God will step in and help you out. But if a woman's in her 9th month, what do people do? Hey, come on, let's speed it up, get the kid out. And so what I try to get across to people is there are times you have to birth yourself. It's time for you to deal with the labor pains and not say, okay, God, fix this. Do I know people who left their troubles to God and are perfectly well today and had cancer disappear? Yes, you see. But that's a different story. These are people who went home not mad at God and just said, God, it's your problem. And they found total peace and healed. So I see all these things. And I've seen people get well when they got angry at God, and gave God hell. And then, again, they got what was within them out, and then they can heal. And that's what we all need to do. But it isn't about punishing. I mean, you have to understand why. See, one of my ways of saying it is, if you could be God for a day, why would you want to be God? And the correct answer is, so I would understand why. And most people, I've never had anybody, well, I had one man answer that way. Almost everybody else is going to fix everything. Even people say, well, I'd be in charge of the weather. And I said, in 2 weeks you will be miserable. Because if you have perfect weather every day, you're in big trouble in 2 weeks. It's totally boring. And see, that's the sad part too. Mankind is not ready for perfection. It has to come from us to be meaningful. So as the young man said, what's evil is not the disease, but to not respond with compassion to the person with the disease. And this is a young man who died of his disease. And that's what we have to remember, you see. So whether it's your son or anyone else, when everybody responds with compassion and love, you and your son can handle the situation because you're surrounded by that kind of support and love.
I'm remembering back around 2000 that I had actually done an interview with a woman who put together a book, and it was 4 different women in 4 different stages of cancer, 4 different religious beliefs and how they approached. And the one thing that rang true, and this is really, I think, going to be very interesting even for the listeners to know this, is she considered, as the other 3 did as well, that they were cancer initiates. In other words, it was sort of almost a rite of passage into life.
Mm-hmm.
And what was quite fascinating about her book is they say, take a look at our images and the way we talk about, for instance, cancer or a terminal illness. We're out to fight it. It's a war. And you realize, where's the possibility for healing with that kind of language surrounding us everywhere?
Yeah, if you go to my website, Bernie Siegel, SIEGELMD.com, one of my articles is Waging a War Against Cancer. I always cite Mother Teresa. Would you come to an anti-war rally? Her response, no. And the people were disappointed. When they turned to leave, she said, but if you have a peace rally, call me. And that's what I try to get across to people. You empower your enemies when you wage war. So what are all the headlines? Farrah Fawcett loses her battle. Why call her a battler? Why call her a loser? This is my answer to it. Because when Billy Graham said not necessarily, see, my feeling is to say to him, okay, Mr. Graham, you give a sermon. You come out of the church, go to your car, and can't find your car keys. Does God want you to walk home? If he said to me, yes, then I would walk home. I'd say, okay, you are living the sermon. But if he said to me, Dr. Siegel, don't be silly. Let's go look for my car keys. I'd say then you're not living the sermon, see?
Mm-hmm.
Because when somebody comes to you who has lost their health, you should help them look for it and find it again, and not blame them for having it or deserving it, but help them look for it the way you are when you lose your keys.
As you put together Faith, Hope, and Healing, how did you make the decision? It probably could have been a couple of people, of the people that you present here in the book.
Well, it really, I was sent the stories. In other words, other people read them. Some of them were people I knew. I mean, I recommended certain people because I knew that they had a lot to teach us. But others were just, one person would tell another person who tells another person, and they just would write it and send their stories in. And then the other editors and other people who decided on them, and once they handed it to me, I just would react to them. And as I say, my reflection. Yeah, I have to tell people there's an introduction and conclusion. I have plenty to say besides all the stories. But it's, again, the lessons that these people are teaching us so that we don't have to learn from our own mistakes. I always say we've had a lot of wisdom in the last few thousand years from a lot of wonderful people. But how many of us have read it? How many of us have made it a part of our behavior? See, the themes are common. When people are survivors, I always say, I can read you a list from United States Marines, kids with cancer, the Bible, Buddha, Talmud, and you'd say, why are you repeating this? I'm not repeating it. They are all, I am reading you a list from each group. Why do they sound alike is because over time they have all learned that this is how you survive difficult times. And that's what people need to do. Learn from the wisdom of those who preceded you and not your own disasters.
It certainly makes the most sense. And, again, as you read through the book, you realize that if it's a friend or if it's you, a loved one, that when something like this happens, that you really have a choice on how you deal with it. And it's amazing when you think about how organizations were built, nonprofits, from a person who becomes terminally ill, and they decide to live in service through that experience to help others. And it really, truly is a choice. It's just really quite amazing to realize that you have that kind of personal empowerment in your hands.
The only thing I always say to people is that we can control our own thoughts. That's it. You can't control the world, but you can control how you react to it and what you do with it. So, one of the things I love to ask people is, how would you describe the experience you have of your illness? Now, that could be anything from a migraine headache to, a life-threatening illness. And the words that pop out of people are always related to the problems in their life. So when somebody with a migraine who's about to go to the hospital told me it was pressure and a burden, I helped her with the pressures and burdens in her life. And instead of going to the hospital, she turned around and went home. And it happened to be her marriage. That was her problem. And somebody else says, failure. And that's not about her body failing, but about the fact, she told me, that her parents committed suicide when she was a child. So she must have been a failure as a child. And this is, again, asking her what it's like to experience cancer, see? And what other words do you hear? Yeah, gift, wake-up call, blessing, new beginning. But you also hear failure, roadblock, draining, confusion, turmoil. And again, my answer is, how do those words fit your life? And let's heal those other things that fit those words. And then you help the person physically as well, because when your life is healed, you'll derive physical benefits. I mean, we have to remember, Monday morning, see, your body's trying to do you a favor. Your body loves you. You get up on Monday and hate your life and despise your work, and your body says, I'll do you a favor. You'll have a heart attack today. You'll spend a few months in the hospital and at home, and you won't have to work. Don't worry. Or it kills you on Monday, So heart attacks, strokes, illnesses, suicides are highest on Monday. And again, if you got up on Monday and said, I love my life and I love my body, then your body says, okay, I'm going to be in there for you, doing everything I can to keep you healthy. And lovers, see, volunteers, okay, that may be a simpler way to explain it. Volunteers live longer, healthier lives. Now, when AIDS first came out, there were a lot of people who were HIV positive would say to me, I don't understand why I'm doing well. I said, you're doing well because you're helping other people with the same problem. And they'd look at me like, oh, yeah. But the mind also is very powerful. I know a man who was told he was HIV positive and was dying until the doctor called him one day and said, it was a mistake. The computer made a mistake in printing out the list. You're not HIV positive. And in a few weeks, he was well again. And he knew all the symptoms because he had a friend who died. But, I mean, that's how powerful the mind is. And the good side is you think you're being treated for cancer, and you're not, but the cancer can still shrink. Or you can have side effects, which is not good, because you think you're being treated. And these things, have been studied and happen when there are medical errors and a whole host of things. Or a radiation therapy machine that didn't have any radioactive material in it. A mistake was made when they repaired it. And yet nobody realized it for a month because everybody who was lying down under the machine acted as if they were being treated. They had side effects. They had tumor shrinking. And that's why the mind it's absolutely incredible how much it can do. It's hypnotic in a sense. An authority tells you something and you have it happen. And the other is people need to understand this, too, that when you put performers on a stage and give them a tragedy and draw their blood while they're acting, their immune function goes down and cortisol levels, stress hormone levels go up. Put them in a comedy, the opposite happens. And you see this in the theater in the winter. If somebody's in some dramatic play.
Unless you're a tragic stand-up comedian.
Yeah. But
then it just stays even.
Yeah. And right. But again, I want people to realize how you act affects you, and this is your life. You're not reading a script, So it's even more dramatic and effective when it's your life that you're living.
For those of you just tuning in, we're talking with Dr. Bernie Siegel about his book, Faith, Hope, and Healing, but most importantly, talking about the way you think and live about your life. Now, Bernie, it's quite interesting these times that we have. Got rid of 8 years of a lot of anxiety, at least that's according to most people. Hope coming into office through President Barack Obama, and then this devastating financial crisis. And you take a look at all these things and how people react and all the blame game going on, and I realized that in the midst of this, how each day I'll get up and I'll have gratitude for what I have and how I can help others to do the same. And when you realize, as you said earlier, that volunteers, people who actually give their time for the sake of helping others, tend to live longer, you realize the miracle in that, because in touching others' lives, you start building a tremendous level of compassion. And I think that sometimes, even with the Bush administration, how a lot of us probably lacked the compassion that maybe we needed to have in light of the fact that here was a man taking on a single job that obviously now that he's out of it is going to age him quite rapidly, and just say, maybe he really truly did the best that he knew how to do. And it's like one of those life lessons that we can learn on a constant basis, even amongst tragedy, to help ourselves rather than blaming, because that could really take you down pretty quick.
I mean, blaming others doesn't accomplish anything. And as I say, almost all of it relates back to how you were parented. Mm-hmm. My sense is, he had trouble, I guess, with alcohol or something, I don't know. But my sense is, whether it was competition with his brother or what, I don't know, but that he didn't feel loved. And so his reaction to the world can be different. Now, I could be wrong, sure, and so forth, but I'd have to ask him, did you feel loved as a child? Or did you feel as loved as your brother? And if not, you see, then how you behave, what you reach out for, how you get noticed can be unhealthy. Because the opposite of love is indifference. It's not hate and fear. So if you feel people are indifferent to you, fine, then you do things to get noticed. And they may not always be healthy or even legal things, but you get the attention, or an illness can get you attention. And there are people who use their illness to get attention from their family and get to be cared for. Mm-hmm. So again, I think all these things enter into it. But I think if we grew up with love and not in a depersonalizing way, that we love all living things, that we're all one family, then the world would be very different. I always say, use love as a weapon. Kill with kindness, torment with tenderness. See, I'd love to be the president, and I would do a couple of things. One is, with the income tax form, you'd have to fill out an application for permission to live. Okay? Now, what am I saying? Not that we're going to cancel your life, but I want to see what you put on it. Because, again, if you wrote on it, I would like to volunteer my time and help other people, I'd say, fine, go ahead, go do your thing. If you wrote on it, an application, well, I want to make more money, I wanted this, I wanted that, I'd say, no, you're in the Peace Corps next year, see, because you have no interest in anybody else but yourself, so we're going to, alter your life a bit. And the other is that I would offer the countries who are my enemies money to make their countries better places. And you'd say, what? Yeah, I mean, think of the amount of money we spent on a war. What if we had said to Saddam Hussein, how about we give you a couple of $1 billion, improve Iraq, make it a happier place to live, and do this as a public offering. What's the rest of the world going to say about you? He's crazy. Well, maybe he's crazy, but isn't he a wonderful man? How can you get mad at him? Look what he's offering, his enemy. And then, of course, your enemy is totally confused and doesn't know what to do with you. Matter of fact, what's her name? Who was the female president of Israel? Golda Meir, years ago said, when the Arabs love their children more than they hate the Jews, wars will cease. Now, I would say it the same way. When the Jews love their children more than they hate the Arabs, wars will cease. So, when we love our children more than we hate our enemies, wars will cease. That's what we need to do. Stop wasting lives and love our enemies, because then you obliterate the enemy. That's how you kill with kindness. You can't have an enemy if you love.
Almost as though you might be quoting a mafia saying that keep your friends close and your enemies closer.
Oh, I have mafia friends. I grew up in New York. And this is what I've learned from my friend Carmine. He said there are 4 ways to eliminate problems. And, people look at the word eliminate, but he's not talking about killing anybody. What he
Take
said
care of?
is, if you're in a marriage or a job, because I say this to people, if you're saying, I'll make this marriage work if it kills me, then get out of there.
Might just do that.
Yeah, that's what he's saying. Get the person to leave, get a divorce, you get out of there. But if not, those are the first 3 choices, see? But number 4 is, if it's not affecting your health, then ask yourself, if I brought love into this relationship, how would it change it? And let me give you a quote from a lady at the hospital at Yale, who I said, you have a wonderful effect on people. I want to give you a gift. She said, sit down, I'll tell you a story. She said, when I took this job, I hated it. I wasn't here for a day, and I couldn't stand the doctors and nurses. So I went to the office. I said, I'm going home. I don't want your job. They said, you can't quit. You have to give 2 weeks' notice. It's in your contract. She said, fine, you got it. And she said, I got up every day miserable for 2 weeks. The last day, I went to work happy, and I noticed something. All the people around me were happy, so I didn't quit. I decided to come in happy. Said that was 2 years ago. So, again, if you're here for a limited time, why not be happy? I mean, I use my mortality as my therapist. That if something's bothering me, well, a friend of mine said this to me that always helps me. I was telling her about some problems I had. She said, Bernie, what do you do if you're hungry? Do you get upset or depressed? I said, no, you get something to eat. All right. She said, then ask yourself, how do I need to nourish myself in my life? And that, I thought, was a wonderful, simple statement. You get depressed, don't get depressed about being depressed. Say, what do I need to change so I don't feel this way again? And that way, that's why I call life a labor pain. See, then you use your pain to change you. Don't get depressed about being depressed, or you don't complain if something is hurting you, like hunger. You'd say, I go get something to eat. Fine. Then motivate yourself and go do something.
I think, too, one of the greatest gifts that you don't see commonplace that we can give as individuals to the world that would actually even help change us for that moving more toward love is just simply as you're walking down the street or you're in the store, you talked earlier about being playful, about, getting a gift certificate. It was a favor. And that is just simply looking someone in the eyes and kindly smiling. And it's amazing what such a simple thing like that gives you back.
Let me say this so that people understand even more than that. If you smile at people, they know you're smiling. Consciousness is not local. What do I mean by that? Walk down the street. Pick out a person walking towards you. Say to yourself, I love this person. He or she is a child of God, and I love you. Just walk and think that, and watch the smile you get when they get close to you. And you're not even smiling or changing your expression, but you're sending out love. And believe me, so if a doctor walks in caring about you, you feel differently. And I've seen this with people too. And the other is that our lives and our consciousness is stored within us, so it affects our organs too. You transplant organs, and the recipient of the new organ has memories of the person whose organ has been put in them. In other words, the donor's life history is now available to the recipient. And there are many books and stories I can tell you forever about this that are just humorous as well as very moving. But consciousness is non-local, and I know this. I mean, you can talk about near-death experience, and blind people see when they leave their bodies. You can talk about communicating with animals, and these are things I've experienced and done, so I know that they happen. And I don't just live based on beliefs. I live based upon my experience. Even though I may not, it's like an astronomer. Can you explain how the universe was created? No. But we're here, so let's accept it, So quantum physicists and astronomers have a lot of fun dealing with uncertainty,
right?
And working at explaining things and looking at creation. And the human body is an incredible experience and creation. And so I'd say accept its potential. That's the word I always like to live with. What's your potential? Oh, it's a wonderful line from Ernest Holmes, the founder of Science of Mind. At least I thought it was a wonderful line, and I keep saying he had to be smiling when he wrote it. He wrote, what if Jesus was the only normal person who ever lived? When I read that, I thought, wow, what a thought. That what are we capable of? I think it's just such a wonderful thing for people to think about. Rather than my limitations and what's going to happen to me, and why not say, I don't know what my limitations are. Let's see what I can achieve and what I can accomplish. Give it a shot. What do you got to lose? But again, if you're worried about, well, what will people think? Yeah, you have a lot to lose. You're living in fear. But when you have faith in yourself and know that I often say, how would you introduce yourself to God? When you know you're part of the divine, that it's not, you don't say to God, it's me, or I'm a doctor. God says, come back when you know who you are. But when you can say to God, it's you, your child, that we're all made of the same thing, come from the same thing, then you understand. And last but not least, I'd say, we all have to realize we're one family. I mean, I give you this question because I love to present it this way. Are you as smart as a fifth grader? Where are we all alike? If I held up a picture of one of us and nobody could tell whether it was you or me, what's it a picture of? Where are we all alike? I'm laughing because this is adults have a problem. By now, all the kids in the class are yelling at me. Our hearts, our insides, yeah, we're all the same color inside, and very few adults ever get that right. But it's as a surgeon, it's something that has impressed me. That when you open somebody up, we're all family. I can rely on that. See, we're all the same. And I keep saying, look, we're different on the outside, so you know who the hell you're talking to, you know?
Right.
It isn't so we kill each other and fight wars. It's so we can recognize each other.
Now, as we were talking, or you mentioned earlier about the subtitle, Inspiring Lessons Learned from People Living with Cancer, you said that it astounded you throughout the book how doctors at times, and it's probably not always their fault, don't have that human side of offering hope and faith during a person's healing. Yeah. And what is being done about that now, or are there possibilities of infringing? Because the one thing I know that we've consistently talked about on our show especially is nutrition. How come this isn't being taught, in the medical communities?
Well, there are two things. One is information doesn't help people unless they have inspiration. Okay?
Right. Okay.
A study at Harvard. Your parents love you. You look up the students 35 years later. If they said yes, 1 out of 4 had suffered a major illness. If they said no, 98% had. That's why I talk so much about love. If you grow up with love, you have self-worth, self-esteem, and you don't do things that are self-destructive. See? I mean, because when people say to me, oh, you didn't give a lecture on nutrition, I said, do you know how many books there are written about nutrition? Go read them. Mm-hmm. You see? So, because what I've learned is if I tell people what to do, they have to be ready to do it. I mean, people can be handed my book and somebody drops it in the wastebasket. So I've learned that when people call me and say, oh, you got to help my uncle, my brother, my kid, I say, give them my home phone number and tell them to call me. Because I've learned. I call them, I get no response. Or they say, oh, I guess I'm dying because you called. So, I want to know that they have motivation. And literally, I get emails from all over the world. I'm amazed. But I say to these people, don't worry, you won't die when you're supposed to. Because if you took the trouble to track me down from halfway around the world, you got survival behavior instincts. Mm-hmm. And that's important. The other is that, yes, it does need to get into medical school so that we're treating people and their experience and to make people feel worthy. In other words, the doctor can reparent you by caring for you and persisting in caring, even if you're self-destructive. In other words, you may be a drug addict, 500 pounds overweight, not taking your medicine for your heart, but I always say to the doctors, give people return appointments endlessly. Why? They're not doing anything. Because you have to prove to them they're worth being cared for. And after 6 months, when you keep caring, they say, hey, I guess I'm worth something. He keeps telling me to come back, so I'll start taking my medicine now. And I've seen that in my office. Totally self-destructive people who were reparented. As a matter of fact, one young lady gave me the title CD. I said, what are you talking about? She said, you're my chosen dad. And she went from wanting to be dead to alive today because somebody showed her they cared. So do we need to get it into medicine? Yeah. We need to humanize the process. And that includes not just writing a prescription, I mean, what you're saying, but how do you keep healthy? How do you stay healthy? Because too often today, especially with the whole process of medical care, it's hurry up, don't talk to people, write them a prescription, get them out of the office, so you'll see more people in the same day. But then people don't respond. They don't take the medicine when the doctor doesn't listen. I mean, these are studies that are done. People come out of an office, say, the doctor listened to you. No. They're less likely to do well or to take their medicine than people who say, oh, yeah, the doctor, we had a nice talk. And I always say the best doctors are criticized by nurses, patients, and family. They're learning from their mistakes. They're learning how to care for people, not just treat a disease. Mm-hmm. Because this is an old ad from the New England Journal of Medicine that I got them to cancel. It said, I'm depressed, unable to cope. I went to see my physician. I said, you've got to help me. Next line is, he prescribed an antidepressant. And that's what the ad was for. I wrote them. I said, excuse me, couldn't you put in one more line that says, sit down, tell me why are you depressed? And they canceled the ad. I said, because if I have a tragedy in my family and I'm depressed and all the doctor does is hand me a prescription, he's not treating me or taking care of me. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, that's what's going on today. Now, is it creeping into medical schools, some courses and humanizing, and do I speak at some of them? Yeah. But again, one sad aspect. I mentioned I do a lot with drawings. You say to medical students and doctors, draw yourself working as a doctor. Okay? You hear those instructions? Draw yourself working as a doctor. I get some pictures handed to me with no people in them. Big computers, stethoscopes, prescription pads, drugs, and no people.
Wow.
It blew my mind. The majority are sitting behind a desk with the diploma on the wall, over their head, and no patients in front of them. Yeah. So it is so depersonalized. One picture that I always show at the other extreme is a young man kneeling in front of a wheelchair. This is a medical student. He's kneeling in front of a wheelchair, handing a woman a tissue with his arm around her. I said, look, he understands what being a doctor is. He's helping her. He may not be able to save her life. See, I discussed the difference between curing and healing. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of people I can't cure. I mean, I can't restore Helen Keller's hearing and sight. I can't make a quadriplegic get up and walk again. I can't make every disease go away, but I can help people heal their lives. And I know quadriplegics who are mouth painters. Look at a Helen Keller who graduates from college and writes wonderful books to help people, Yeah, I'd say to anybody, read all her books. She'll tell you how to live. And those are the things that become significant to me, to try to help guide people and heal them, because I know I can't cure everything. And that's why my life was redirected back to that sentence. I need to know how to live between office visits. When I heard that, it connected for me, because then I could help everybody. Even though I couldn't cure diseases, I could help them to live. And as I say, the gift is when you enjoy living, you don't die when you're supposed to.
The book is Faith, Hope, and Healing, and our guest today, Dr. Bernie Siegel. And Bernie, I'd like you to go ahead and give your website out so people can find out more about you.
Bernie Siegel, SIEGELMD.com. And let me say that they can contact me personally through that, because that's, my personality as a doctor. People call me, I answer.
Amazing.
Right. Surprises a lot of people.
Well, again, I want to tell you, what a real pleasure it was to be able to take this moment and talk with you. Again, like I said, I knew about you and your work back in the 90s, and I'm like, if more people could just connect with that and kind of expand their minds, it's amazing how their lives can just turn out.
That's right. And as I say, what has made me feel good about my life is that the ripples, that what I call the seeds, I mean, they spread around the world. Mm-hmm. So I hear from people in, India, Estonia, Somalia, but, they're survivors, and they get in touch with me. And I'm amazed sometimes. I mean, I finally have realized that when I'm getting an email and I say, where do you live? It's like we can get together or come to a support group. And they say, well, I'm only 6,000 miles away from you. But we're still helping each other and changing the world in that way. And so I'd say to everybody out there, just do it one step at a time, and a lot of things will happen.
Very good. Well, Dr. Bernie Siegel, thank you for joining us on the program today. It's been a pleasure.
Okay.
You bet.
Bye-bye.
Want to also thank you, the listeners out there, for tuning in. You've been listening to the Beyond 50 radio program. Be sure to visit us at our website at beyond50radio.com. And also sign up for our free weekly e-newsletter where you can find out all the wonderful resources that we have available. We'd also like to thank the following sponsor for making this program possible, and that is ZRT Laboratory. If you are suffering from hot flashes, foggy thinking, sudden weight gain, low libido, mood swings, and the other effects of aging, ZRT Laboratory, the forerunner in hormone testing, is your first step toward ending troublesome symptoms. Simply visit them online at www.zrtlab.com to find out how their home collection kits can help detect and correct hidden hormone imbalances. So let testing be your guide to symptom relief and life-changing solutions that begin with you. Thank you for tuning in again. You've been listening to the Beyond 50 radio program. I'm Daniel Davis, and remember, live your day past halfway.